My package arrived, I said joyfully as I signed off for my package and skipped to my bedroom. I'd been waiting 6 whole weeks for this, and I was so excited. The package was smaller than expected, and when I opened it, I understood why. It wasn't the package I expected. It was a picture of a woman with a child on her lap. That child was me. In the box was a note. Your father is a liar? Hi, my name is Naomi. Before I tell you about the time where my life was completely turned around, like and subscribe to this channel. This way you can see more stories from people like me. Oh, and don't forget to hit that notification bell. So to give you a little backstory, my dad has been the only parent I have ever known. My dad said my mom died shortly after giving birth. My dad and I were inseparable, and he is amazing. But as I looked in the pictures in the box, I couldn't help but wonder if my mom died during childbirth. Because then it couldn't be her in the picture with me, could it? Did my dad lie to me? I rushed to my bookshelf and pulled my photo album, sat on my bed and flipped through the pages. I found a picture of me in the exact same outfit. I turned the picture around and on the back it said Naomi's 5th birthday. My mind was blown. My dad gave me pictures of my mom, so I knew what my mother looked like. So the question now stood at, what really happened to my mom? I waited impatiently for my dad to get home from work. I couldn't concentrate on my homework. I decided to ditch it till I got some answers. I kept staring at the pictures in the box and wondering what my life would be like if my mom was alive. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted my thoughts. I grabbed the 2 pictures, one with my mom and I and the other with just me, and I rushed to the front door and opened it. Hey honey, how was school? My dad asked as he jumped out of the car and headed towards me. Dad, what happened to Mom? I questioned him as he kissed me on my forehead and went into the house. I followed him and closed the door behind us. He looked at me confused and replied, You know that your mom died after childbirth. Where's this coming from? I showed him the 2 pictures, and a wave of emotions washed over his face briefly, before his expression became blank. Dad? What happened to Mom? How could she be dead when clearly she was at my 5th birthday party? I looked at him curiously. I decided not to tell my dad about the note. Where did you get this picture? He asked softly. Does that even matter? These pictures are obviously photoshopped, my dad said harshly as he shoved the photos into my hands. Stop this foolishness. Your mom is gone. My dad walked away and spent the rest of his evening in his room. The next few days, we got numerous notes saying the same thing. Tell her the truth. I asked my dad who could be sending these notes and what they were talking about, but he brushed it off. One day, I got a note at school inside my locker, and that's when I guess my dad decided to take the notes seriously. My dad was very predictable. We've had the same predictable Saturday for as long as I could remember. We would wake up, go for a jog around the savannah, get breakfast, binge watch anything we missed during the week, and then we would head to the library, and then the mall. But this Saturday was different. Naomi, I have a few things to get done at the office today, okay? My dad said as he quickly exited the house. I watched from the window as my dad got into the car, but I knew something was wrong. He was dressed in office attire, but his briefcase was still at the door where he left it the day before. I called the office. Sarah, his assistant, answered the phone. Hey Sarah, this is Naomi. Is my dad expected at the office today? I asked casually. Hi Naomi. No, he actually took next week off. He said that he had something important that he needed to get done. Is everything okay at home? She asked, concerned. Everything is fine. I lied. I thanked Sarah and I hung up. What is my dad up to? Who's he going to see? What is he going to do that he needed to take a week from the office? My eyes widened as I realized my dad knew where the notes were coming from, and he probably went to meet the sender. I waited anxiously for my dad to get home, but that night my dad did not return home. With each passing minute, I grew more worried than the last. I wondered if I should call the police, but I decided against it. I mean, what was I going to tell them? I had obviously nothing to go on. I sighed in frustration. I knew that my dad was in trouble because usually he would check in on me during the day to make sure that I was okay. But so far, I hadn't even received a message. I needed to know where he went. I went to his study and looked through his desk for any clues, but my father was a neat freak, and nothing was out of place. Breathe, Naomi, breathe. Focus on the task, don't be overwhelmed. I said to myself as I felt the frustration build inside me. I sank into my dad's office chair heavily, leaned back, and massaged my temples. My eyes glanced at his notepad and a pencil that was left next to it. My father never left his pencils on his desk, ever. There was a piece of paper sticking out at the top indicating that a page was recently torn from the pad. Bingo! I got the clue that I needed. I took the pencil and shaded the page of the notepad. I saw it in a movie once, and I hoped it worked. My eyes lit up when I realized that the indented letters were an address. I jotted the address on another piece of paper, and I went to my laptop to see if I could find a place that matched. The place that matched was St. Elizabeth's Mental Institution. Say what? I looked at the image of St. Elizabeth's Mental Institution. I felt as though I was going further and further into a rabbit hole. The further I went, the darker things got. Why would my dad go to a mental institution? My dad had no siblings, and his parents died when he was a child. I didn't know any of my mother's side of the family since my dad said she was an only child and she grew up in an orphanage. At 11 p.m., I was still flickering through channels on the television, hoping that my dad would walk through the door. Even though I was worried, I couldn't help but be angry with him. If he had told me who was sending the letters and the truth about my mom, he would have been home. I would have been sleeping, but most importantly, I would have known the truth. Parents really do make things more difficult than they need to be. The next day, tired and restless, I went to St. Elizabeth's. Hi, good morning. Did my dad come here yesterday? I asked politely. I showed the receptionist the picture of my dad. Good morning. Yes, he was here. But the person he was looking for no longer stays at the institution. She responded. Would it be possible to get an address or even the name of the person he came to meet? I'm sorry. That's against their policy. Only next of kin are allowed that kind of information. I thanked her and felt defeated. Who was the relative that my father came here to see? Why did he keep that a secret from me? What if the person was my mother? I needed to find my father, and I needed to find him now. As I raced home, I thought about ways I could track my father's phone. When I finally arrived, I went to work. I looked through the internet and found an app that I could use to track my father's phone. Luckily, I had my father's credit card information, so that I could pay for the app. Thank you, intrusive technology. I whispered as I punched my father's number into the app and waited for the results. I traced my father's phone to a village called Moruga, which was located in the countryside. I called the police to file a missing persons report and tell them everything I knew, including my father's whereabouts. I told them that I will be visiting the area that night and hung up. While my father wasn't a violent man, he understood the dangers that lurked around corners. I wore all black and a black beanie on my head. My pants had multiple pockets to hold my money, a taser, my phone, and a small bottle of pepper spray. I needed to be ready for whatever I met in Moruga. I already lost my mother. I wasn't about to lose my father without a fight. At 5 p.m., I left home in a taxi, high on adrenaline to track my father. As the car moved away from the bustling streets and began to drive on long, silent roads lined with trees, my adrenaline was on zero. When I was close enough, I thanked the driver, paid, and got out of the taxi. The road was dimly lit, and there was one house on the street. I called the police again to let them know where I was. It looked run down, and the porch light was flickering. I snuck to the back of the house, listening intently for any movement. I opened the door, and my heart raced as the door squeaked loudly. I entered quickly and let it shut behind me. The house was messy, and it smelled like beer and lavender. I walked through the house slowly and realized that no one was at home. The only light that was on was the basement light. I pushed through the door and was surprised that it was open. I walked down the steps, and there he was. "Dad!" I shrieked louder than I wanted. I rushed to his side. My dad sat in a chair bound and gagged. His head had a gash and dry blood ran along his face. I knelt down beside him and he opened his swollen eyes and smiled. I immediately began to cut the ropes. As soon as he was loose, I draped my father's arm around my shoulder and helped him towards the stairs. We were able to get to the back door, but when I opened it, we came face to face with her, the woman from the pictures. "Mom?" I asked, confused. I looked at Dad. The woman pushed her way into the house, forcing us back into the house. "Where do you think you're going, Dwight?" the woman said as she grabbed my father by the hair and threw him to the ground. "Dad!" I screamed as I ran to him. "Dwight, aren't you going to introduce me to your pretty daughter?" the woman asked, circling us like prey. "This is your aunt, your mom's older sister, Nora," my dad said softly. I looked at him in disbelief. He continued, "I went to St. Elizabeth's because I knew Nora was sending the letters. However, when I got there, I was told she was released, and I was given this address. She blamed me for what happened to your mother, and we got into an argument. She knocked me over the head, and when I woke up, I was tied to the chair." "Tell her what you did to Deborah. Tell her how you let them take her away," Nora shouted at my dad. My dad broke down and began to cry. I snuggled into him and buried my head in his chest. I had never seen my dad like this before. Through the tears, he explained that when I was younger, there was a home invasion. My aunt, my mom, my dad, and I were home at the time. My dad was closest to the door, and when they came in, my dad protected me, and my mom was taken. Hearing the commotion in the living room, my aunt came in just as my mom was being dragged outside. My dad stopped my aunt from going after my mom. He quickly barricaded the door and called the police. When the police arrived, my dad reported what happened. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. My mom was never found. My aunt blamed my dad for not protecting her sister. He had no choice but to take out a restraining order on Nora, who began sending him death threats. And because she was unable to deal with the loss of her sister, she was warded in St. Elizabeth's. The police sirens indicated that the police had arrived on the scene. My dad was taken to the hospital, and my aunt was taken away by the police. As I sat and looked at my dad, helpless in the hospital bed, I couldn't help but wonder why he kept that secret from me. I wonder what other secrets he might be hiding. I will never be able to look at my dad the same again. That evening, I went home to shower and gather a few things. Then I planned to return to the hospital. When I opened the door to leave, I saw a package on the doorstep. I looked around before picking it up, and I brought it inside. I opened it, and my heart stopped when I saw what was inside the box. There was a picture of my mother, my real mother, and a note that read, "Your father is a liar. Your mother is still alive. If you want to see her, come alone." I ran to my room to check the previous notes. Judging by the handwriting, this wasn't my Aunt Nora's work, which meant someone else knew something about my mom. What should I do? Should I do what they say, or is it a trap? Please help me and leave your advice in the comments below.
So you probably have a dad who scolds you when you do something wrong or gives you long lectures about things that don't really matter. Maybe he has some boring, lame job and does nothing at home but watch television and drink beer. Sometimes he tells pretty awful dad jokes, but that's as bad as it gets. You think you're pretty unlucky, right? Well, wait until you hear about my dad. Before I continue my story, make sure you like and subscribe as quickly as possible. Then make one wish and it will come true by next Friday. Hit that notification bell just to be extra sure your wish comes true. Now make sure you stay with me because this story gets worse and worse. I'm the only child of a woman named Janet and a man named Felix. When I was 10 years old, they made me sit down on the living room couch and had the talk with me. No, not the birds and the bees talk. It went like this. "Brian, I'm no longer in love with your father. We have decided to go our separate ways. Because you are a boy, we decided that you would live with your father. I am moving to Australia, but I will make an effort to see you on birthdays, holidays, and other special days," my mom said. In other words, we are getting a divorce. It's when married people are no longer legally obligated to stay together, my dad added. Obligated? I asked, nearly in tears. "Never mind, son. Mom is moving out tomorrow," he replied. I cried all night because I couldn't imagine a life without my mom and dad together. I always thought they'd get old together and I'd bring their awesome grandchildren to play with them. 5 years later, and here I was with my boring corporate lawyer dad, who still behaved like a normal dad. My life was pretty average. At high school, I wasn't super popular, but I wasn't a dork either. I had some cool friends and we did the usual cool teenage things together. I was dating a cute girl named Gina, but I had the hugest crush ever on Hillary. She was 19 years old and had already left high school, but I stalked her on social media to find out what she was doing all the time. I even had pictures of her hidden on my phone so Gina wouldn't find them. I don't know how I became so obsessed with Hillary. I just fell head over heels for her the first time I saw her. Anyway, on a completely average day after school, I got home and found my dad going through my closet. "What are you doing, Dad? Did you lose something?" I asked. "My clothes aren't hip. I need something cool to wear, but you don't even have anything." "Hey, let's go to the mall. We'll buy some stuff and have dinner there," he said. I didn't really understand what was going on at this point, but I decided to play along. We went to the mall and my dad looked around at all the teenage boys. "I want what they're wearing. Where do we buy these clothes?" he asked. "Dad, are you okay?" I asked while taking him to a clothing store anyway. He tried on a few trendy outfits for people 30 years younger than him. Every time he tried on something new, he'd come out of the changing room and ask me what I thought. My answer was the same every time. "Dad, it's not for a person your age." But he didn't care. He bought at least 30 new outfits and got me a few new things too. Then we went to eat pizza and went home. At school the next day, I decided to ask my friends about it. We were sitting under a tree outside, skipping chemistry class because, well, chemistry sucked. "Have your dads ever done anything weird?" I asked. "My dad is weird, period. He puts hot sauce on his pancakes." "I need more context, Brian," Kenny said. "Well, yesterday he was going through my closet and then, before I could finish, my dad pulled up next to us on a motorbike. A whole bike." "Are you guys skipping class?" he asked. Yeah," I replied. "Way cool, dude," he said, and I was shocked. The dad I knew before would scold me and I'd be grounded for at least a month. Then, in another exciting twist of events, he invited my friends over to play video games that afternoon. He said he just bought the latest video game console and hundreds of new games. Then he sped off on his new bike and I didn't see him again until I got home. My friends came over later, but my dad had stepped out for a while. I took them to the living room where there was a brand new PlayStation and loads of games. This is what I was trying to tell you all earlier, guys. Before, my dad wouldn't hear a thing about video games. I don't even know how to operate this thing. And now this? The bike? And did you see what he was wearing? I said to my friends. "Well, I'd just go with the flow if I were you. You're getting to benefit from this midlife crisis or whatever it is," Kenny said, and the other guys laughed. Suddenly, my dad barged into the room wearing a multicolored hoodie, huge gold chain, and the latest Jordans. I was so embarrassed. If he wore this to his office, he'd lose all his clients. He played games with my friends all night. I tried to play too, but because I was a novice, I kept losing everything. I really wondered how my dad was so good at this. Eventually, my friends thought he was the coolest guy in the universe. I got up to get a snack, and when I got back to the living room, they were teaching him how to use TikTok. This was a total disaster because the next day, he set up a TikTok account and followed all the kids at my school. He started posting videos of himself dancing and doing anything else that was trending on the app. That week was rough. Everyone started referring to me as the kid with the weird dad. About a month passed, and my dad continued to gain fame on TikTok. He also kept inviting my friends over to play video games. I entertained it at first, but eventually I began locking myself in my room while they were over. Or sometimes I'd go hang out with my girlfriend Gina. She didn't understand why I was upset though. Anyway, one Friday I was grateful that I had made it to the end of the week without my dad doing anything extremely stupid. I rushed home because I planned to go watch a movie with Gina that night. When I got home, my friends were already there chilling out with my dad. I went to the shower and changed, and when I got back downstairs, my friends had left. "Where are you off to?" my dad asked. "I'm going to watch a movie with Gina." "Oh, cool. I've got a date too. I'll drop you off at Gina's house." He got ready and was actually dressed like a normal dad this time, except he had overdone it a bit. He was wearing a fancy suit. "You're going somewhere really expensive, huh, Dad? She must be a really special lady," I said. "She definitely is. I met her on Tinder. I heard that this is how young people find true love nowadays," he said. Dad? What? Never mind." I decided not to explain what Tinder was actually used for. He dropped me off at Gina's house, and I prayed that whatever woman he was meeting would help him come back to his senses. She didn't, apparently, whoever she was, because the next week, my dad invited all his TikTok friends to a house party he was hosting that weekend. That included almost everyone at my high school. "Brian, your dad is so cool. You must be so happy to have a dad who's throwing parties," random people would tell me as I walked through the hallway. Almost everyone said they would come. People even tried to become my friend, so I'd introduce them to my dad. Go with the flow, man. Just go with the flow, Kenny kept telling me. Oh, and look at this hot pic Hillary uploaded on IG, he continued while pushing his phone in front of my face. I guess he just wanted to take my mind off things. I'd been so stressed lately, I hadn't been keeping up with what my forever love was doing. The hottest girl in the universe and my future wife. In her latest picture, she was dressed in an elegant dress and showing off a new diamond bracelet. The caption was, "My new bae loves me so much, he's the best." Looks like she's taken now, but whatever, you already have Gina. Kenny laughed. Her new bae and Gina are temporary. We will be together someday, I said seriously. Dude, you're 15. She's 19 and way too old for you. Besides, where are you gonna get money for diamond bracelets anyway? She seems a little bit too high maintenance, he said. I knew he was just trying to cheer me up, but I rolled my eyes and walked away. That night, I tried to talk my dad out of hosting the party, but he wouldn't listen. It's gonna be lit, on fleek, so stop tripping my G, he replied. Dad, don't use those words. You can't even use them properly, I whined. Like, OMG, I'm weak. I can't with you, Brian. Anyway, I'm not canceling my party. Plus, my new girlfriend is gonna be there, he said. She's already your girlfriend? Your first date was last week. I was shocked. I guess I got game, he winked and went upstairs. So the party happened, and no matter how I felt, there were so many people I couldn't even find Kenny and the other guys. People were drinking alcohol too, and I found it weird that my dad didn't mind at all. He was standing on a table dancing while a crowd cheered around him. I just took a few snacks and went back up to my room. Gina was there, so that made things a bit better. We were watching some silly videos on YouTube when I heard a knock on my door. It was Kenny. Have you seen your dad? We're out of snacks. Oh, and Hillary's here. I wonder how she found out about this party, he said. My eyes lit up so brightly that Gina could probably tell how I felt. Who's Hillary? She said angrily. Nobody, I said while getting up quickly and rushing out of my room with Kenny. I really didn't care about finding my dad, but Hillary, the hottest girl in the universe, in my house, I was ready to faint. I searched up and down, but I didn't find any of them. Okay, Kenny, the only room I haven't checked is my dad's study. He probably got a work call, so he's dealing with that, I said. We walked to the study and I opened the door without knocking. My mouth and heart dropped to the floor. There was my dad making out with Hillary on his desk. Dad, I screamed. How could you do this to me? She's the love of my life. Is that your girlfriend? You're the one who bought her that diamond bracelet? You make me sick. Son, calm down, he said. I turned around to leave, but Gina was standing right behind me with tears in her eyes. I thought I was the love of your life, she said and ran away. I turned to Kenny. How exactly do I go with the flow in this situation? You can all go to hell, I screamed and went back up to my room. I stayed there for the day and refused to come out. I tried apologizing to Gina, but she wasn't hearing any of it. I eventually left my room later because I was starving. When I got to the kitchen, my dad was in there with Hillary, who was wearing a very flattering nightgown. Did you sleep here? What's going on? I asked. Well, yes, she's moving in, and I'd appreciate it if you stopped speaking about her like she wasn't right in front of you. It's disrespectful, my dad replied. You're despicable, Dad, I answered and left the room. At school the next week, Kenny tried to convince me to look on the bright side. You'll be able to see her every single day. You won't need to stalk her on social media anymore because she'll be in your house, he said. I guess that's one way of looking at it, but she's with my dad. That's gross as hell. He gets to do all the things I should be doing, and what's he gonna do next? Ask me to call her mom? This really sucks. And now Gina won't talk to me at all, I sighed. Hey Brian, I can't wait for the next party at your house. This Saturday, right? A random stranger interrupted our conversation. My dad's planning more parties? I asked, puzzled. Go with the flow, Kenny laughed. I wanted to punch him this time. After 2 more parties, I really couldn't take it anymore. I called my mom and begged her to send me a plane ticket so I could live with her. She sounded unsure and felt like my dad would never agree to it. So I had no choice. I stole my dad's credit card and bought it myself. I left on a Saturday when he was too busy with my friends to notice. He didn't see me walk down the stairs with my suitcase, and he didn't see me get into the taxi that took me to the airport. The flight to Australia took forever, but when I got there, I felt relieved. I gave my mom's address to a taxi driver, and he drove me straight to her house. She was thrilled to see me, and I was just thankful that she behaved like an adult. Living with my mom has been a different experience. Her new husband is about 15 years older than she is, but after my experience with my dad, I'm happy to be living with old people now. My dad only noticed I was gone the afternoon after the party. He freaked out for a while, but my mom forced me to call him and let him know I was safe. I would have let him suffer a little longer, though.
When I moved to a new school, I wasn't that nervous if I'm being completely honest. Sure, I know that moving to a new school can be quite scary, especially if you don't know anyone. But I just wasn't nervous. I'm quite an outgoing person, so I find it easy to make friends. So when I moved to that new school, I thought this was going to be a great start to a new chapter in my life. Little did I know that everything would go downhill from that point on. But before I go on, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll become the most popular kid at school. Trust me, it really works. I had to move because of my mom's work. You see, my mom was a workaholic. She had business trips all over the world and she spent more time overseas than at home with me and my dad. My dad also worked at this huge tech company, and I know this may sound sad, but I never really saw my parents that much. My mom was being moved to a different company, so that was why we had to move. I wasn't that bothered, to be honest. My old school was all right, I guess, and I didn't really have many friends there. The kids there were pretty nerdy. All they cared about was homework and tests and school. They weren't fun. So I was hoping when I moved to this new school, I would find someone who was more like me. Fun, carefree. Not to say I didn't get good grades. I was still pretty smart, but I knew life wasn't all about work. Unlike my parents. Anyways, my first day at school was pretty eventful. As soon as I arrived at the classroom, a few girls came up and started picking on me. "Hey, look at the new kid," said one girl rudely. "Oh God, what are you wearing?" I looked down at my plain white top and jeans. "What?" "It's so ugly," she said. "Hey, what's your name?" I sighed. "Jane." The girl's face lit up. "Oh my God, this is perfect. You're plain Jane." Everyone in the class started laughing and pointing fingers at me. As it turned out, this new school wasn't going to be that great. The rest of the school day was miserable. No one talked to me, and when I tried to make friends, they would turn away because they didn't want to be seen with plain Jane. At lunch, I sat at a table all by myself. It was like I had the plague or something. No one wanted to come within a few meters of me. When I got home, I told my parents about how terrible it was. "Don't worry, Jane," said Mom. "Things will work out better in the end." "Yeah, don't worry," added Dad. "You just wait, you'll see." And I did wait, but nothing changed. Well, one thing did. One thing that turned my world upside down. It was a stormy night. I was at home with my parents. We were having spaghetti bologna for dinner, and we were out of spaghetti, so my mom went to the grocery store to get some. I was kind of nervous since it was really stormy outside, but I knew my mom would be fine. But then an hour passed. She should have been back by now. Then 2 hours. I was freaking out by this point. My dad called the cops and they went to search for her, but they couldn't find her. My mom had disappeared. For the rest of that night, there was still no sign of my mom. There were security cameras on the highway that spotted her driving up the road, so she definitely left in her car towards the grocery store. But then the security cameras lost her. She hadn't had an accident because there was no reports of any crashes on her route. So where could she be? She wouldn't have just abandoned us. Something must have happened. What if someone kidnapped her? I was so worried. For several weeks, there was still no sign of Mom. She wasn't answering her phone. We put up posters around town, but no one said they had seen her. It was like she had never existed. Meanwhile, school was worse than ever. I now had 3 bullies who actually picked on me every day. I had no friends, and now my mom had disappeared. Could things get any worse? Well, apparently they could. You see, my dad hadn't handled my mom's disappearance very well. Sometimes I would hear him crying in the shower, and I knew he wasn't getting much sleep. It was to be expected, but sometimes I would just wish that my dad would comfort me, not the other way around. I was the one who had lost my mom. And then came that fateful day. The day that changed everything. I came home from school to find my dad was gone. At first, I freaked out, thinking now my dad had disappeared. But pretty soon, I heard his car pull into the driveway. I went to the window to watch him come in, but I was surprised to see he was carrying a huge cardboard box and he brought it into the living room. "What's this?" I asked. Dad didn't say anything. He just looked really excited. He opened it and revealed inside a human-sized doll. It had blonde hair and a pretty dress on. I was so shocked I didn't even know what to say. But finally, after a few minutes of staring in surprise, I managed to say something. "Dad, why do you have a doll?" I asked. Dad didn't say anything though. He just patted the doll and smiled. Then he picked it up and carried it into his office. I was so confused. First, Mom left, and now Dad had this weird doll. It was like he was trying to replace my mom with a doll. I was getting really freaked out by this point. I decided to spy on my dad, and I went round to the back of the house where there was a window looking into his office. I sneaked up, and what I saw made my whole world explode. The doll was sitting on a desk, and my dad was talking to it. Like a real person. He was even stroking its head and seemed to be having a conversation. I was so creeped out, I just had to leave straight away. I ran straight into my room and I locked the door. Was Dad going crazy? Is that what had happened? This wasn't normal, right? But I decided to give my dad the benefit of the doubt. Maybe there was a logical explanation for all of this. Maybe he was just looking after the doll for someone else? But that seemed unlikely. I decided to go outside and ask Dad what was going on. It was dinner time by then, and I heard Dad in the kitchen. I went into the dining room, and I screamed. There, sitting up at the table, was the human-sized doll. "Dad!" I screamed. Dad came running into the dining room. "What is it, Jane? What's wrong?" I pointed at the doll. I was shaking. "Oh," Dad chuckled. "That's just Sophia. She's going to have dinner with us." I felt my jaw drop. My mom's name was Sophia. Did my dad really name the doll after his missing wife? "Dad, are you okay?" I asked nervously. Dad looked confused. "What? Of course I am. Go on, sit down at the table. Dinner will be ready soon." "But..." "Jane, do as you're told." I had no choice but to sit down at the table. I tried to sit as far as possible from the doll. It was like it was staring at me. It wasn't alive, was it? I laughed nervously at myself, but I still tried to avoid eye contact with the doll. Dad came with the dinner, and he spent the rest of the evening chatting to the doll, having a conversation, even though it was only one-sided. Think that was weird? Wait till I tell you about the other weird stuff my dad did with the doll. He took us on family trips. My dad would carry the doll into the car and buckle her up while I sat in the back. Then we'd go on trips, riding around the country, visiting tourist destinations and attractions. All the while, I thought I was losing my mind. Well, rather, my dad was losing his mind. This was crazy, insane. As we drove by, I could see people staring at us. They were probably wondering who this crazy man was with a huge doll in the passenger seat. I was wondering the same thing. By now, I knew I had to call the police. My dad was a lunatic. My mom was missing. I was pretty sure my dad had done something to my mom and then replaced her with the doll. But why? And where was Mom? But before I could, something happened that none of you would expect. I was at home in my room. Dad was in the living room, probably talking to the doll again. I was sitting doing homework, and then I heard a car pull in the driveway. I was wondering who it was, so I went out to see, and then I felt my jaw drop. That car. I recognized it. It was my mom's car. I ran outside, and sure enough, there was my mom, walking up the path. I couldn't believe it. "Mom!" I yelled. I ran straight to her and hugged her. She stroked my head. "I'm sorry I had to go for so long, Jane," she said. "Why did you go? What? Where?" I was so confused, but I was mostly just happy to have my mom back. Things were getting really crazy at home. I had to go into hiding," explained Mom. "What? Why?" "Because, well, Jane, I'm not exactly an honest person. I'm actually a criminal." "A criminal?" "Shh, not so loud. Yes, a criminal. Well, sort of. You see, I work in an undercover organization that targets the rich. We sort of steal money from them, but we don't keep it for ourselves. No, we deal it out to the poor. I guess you could call us the Robin Hood group." "But why did you have to leave?" "Some bad people were after me, so I had to lay low for a while. But they're gone now, and I can come back home. I'm so sorry I had to do this to you, darling." I nodded, but I was still stunned. So much had happened in such a short amount of time. Mom guided me back inside the house, and we walked into the living room. Then I felt her freeze. "What on earth?" she said. Dad was sitting on the couch watching TV with his hand around the doll. Dad stared at Mom like he'd seen a ghost. "What? You're back?" yelled Dad. "Yes, I'm back," snapped Mom. "What is this thing?" Dad looked so confused. He looked from Mom to the doll and back again. He scratched his head. "I'm confused." "What's going on?" yelled Mom. What is this doll doing here? I felt like I had to step in and explain everything. Mom, you see, ever since you left, Dad had found it hard to cope, and so he got this doll thing. I know it sounds weird, and listen to this. He named it after you. Mom looked back at my dad in fury. Well, what do you have to say for yourself? Dad sat there gaping like a fish. That's it, yelled Mom. I leave for a few months and come back to find that you've replaced me with a doll? Fine, have it your way. She rushed to the front door. Mom, where are you going? I was scared she was going to disappear again. Don't worry, Jane, I'm coming back. Just wait here. Mom went into the car and drove off. I was so scared. I didn't want to call the cops because now I knew my mom was sort of a criminal. She might get into trouble. But I was also terrified that she would leave me again. I'll give her 2 hours, I thought to myself. If she's still not back by then, I'll call the cops. An hour passed, then an hour and a half. I was just about to grab the phone when I heard Mom's car pull into the driveway again. She got out of the car, and this time she was carrying a huge cardboard box. I felt déjà vu hit me. That big cardboard box looked strangely familiar. She carried it into the living room right in front of my dad, and she started to rip it open. She looked really angry. Then she opened it up and revealed a doll was inside. Mom, what are you doing? I yelled. Were both my parents crazy? Mom took out the doll. This one was a male one, and it looked oddly like my dad. My mom picked it up and took it to her room. Dad watched her and seemed to be jealous, but then he looked back at his own doll and seemed to forget about Mom. I just stood there, absolutely shocked. What was going on? That evening, we had dinner at the dining table. I thought this night would be full of joy and laughter now that Mom was back, but there was only silence. My mom and dad sat at opposite ends of the table, and their dolls were sitting next to them. They only had eyes for their dolls. Mom was obviously trying to make Dad jealous, but Dad didn't seem to be bothered. The evening ended with Mom yelling at my dad and telling him she was going to divorce him. And, well, she did. My mom and dad divorced, and my mom thankfully won custody. I still don't know what happened to my dad. Maybe my mom's disappearance triggered something in his brain that caused him to lose his mind. I don't know. What I do know is that to this day, my dad still has that doll. My mom, of course, got rid of the male doll. I'm just glad that at least one of my parents is still sane, even if she is a...
Tyler, get to the principal's office right now.
No, miss, please. I'm sorry. I won't mess around anymore, I said. I couldn't get detention again. My dad would kill me. I was always getting into trouble at school. It wasn't my fault. All the teachers picked on me, especially Miss Jenkins. They said I was a troublemaker and I disrupted all their lessons, but it wasn't true. Half the time, it was my friends messing around, but it always seemed to be me that got caught. I pleaded with her not to give me detention, but she wouldn't back down. I had no choice but to go to see Principal Matthews. Of all my rotten luck, Allison, the most popular girl in school, was having a huge party this weekend, and I had been invited. If my dad found out that I had got into trouble again, there was no way he would let me go. I couldn't let Dad know I had detention again, so I sent Mom a text telling her that I was staying after school for some extra soccer practice. That would explain why I was late home. I finished my detention and ran straight home. Dad was sitting in the room when I got there. "Tyler, come in here," he said. "How was your soccer practice?" "Yeah, it was good," I said. "Right, you're grounded." "What? Why?" "I know you were in detention again. I got an email from the principal telling me." "But it's Allison's party." "Too bad." But before I go on, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more crazy stories. The morning after Allison's party, I opened my phone and looked at all the photos that my friends had posted online. It looked like it had been so much fun. I couldn't believe that I had missed out on such a good party. I was so annoyed with my dad for grounding me. All I could think about was getting some kind of revenge on my dad, but I had no idea what I could do. I was scrolling through all the photos when suddenly an ad popped up. Usually I just skip the ads, but something caught my eye. "Do you want to brainwash someone?" it said. I clicked on the link. The more I read, the more I realized that this was the perfect answer. In only a few lessons, I could learn how to hypnotize my dad. Then I could control him and make him do everything I wanted. I clicked to make an order. It was quite expensive, but I didn't care. When the package arrived, it had everything that I needed to brainwash my dad. There was a booklet with instructions on how to hypnotize someone and a watch on a chain. I needed to get my dad on his own to do it. I couldn't risk Mom walking in and catching me. I didn't have to wait long for an opportunity. The following day, Mom said she was going out for lunch with her friends. "No problem," said Dad. "Tyler and I will just have the leftover chicken for our lunch." Dad put the plates on the table and we sat down. I got the watch out of my pocket and started waving it from side to side in front of Dad's face. Almost immediately, Dad seemed to go into some kind of trance. I couldn't believe it. I had managed to hypnotize him on the first try. I told him that he must do everything that I ordered him to do, that he should worship me and do whatever he could to make my life perfect. "Now, when I snap my fingers, you will wake up and you won't remember any of this," I told him. I clicked my fingers loudly. Dad came out of the trance and looked at me. "Come on, Tyler, eat your chicken." I decided now was the time to test if the hypnotism had worked. "Dad, go get me a glass of water," I said. My dad jumped up from his chair and went straight to the kitchen. A few minutes later, he came back holding a glass of water in his hand. "Here you go, Tyler." I wondered what else I could get him to do. "Dad, after lunch, you will need to do my homework for me." "Okay, just give it to me and I'll get it done for you." I couldn't believe it. This was perfect. I knew that my life was going to be so easy from then on. And it was. I didn't have to do anything. Even when Mom gave me some chores to do, I just waited until she was out of the room and I ordered my dad to do it. Sometimes I would get Dad to do things just for a laugh, like the time I had a few friends round to watch a movie. I told them I could get my dad to do anything I wanted, but they didn't believe me. "Okay, prove it," said my friend Jake. "Get your dad to crawl around the house pretending to be a dog and we'll believe you." My dad came into the lounge and I told him what I wanted him to do. He immediately got down on all fours, walking around, growling and barking like a dog. My friends were in hysterics. "Oh my God, that's the funniest thing we've ever seen," they said. Suddenly, I heard Mom opening the front door. "Okay, Dad, that's enough. You can stop now," I said. I couldn't risk my mom seeing him like that. If she found out I was able to control him, I would be in big trouble. I managed to keep it from her for a long time, until one night when we were sitting at the dining room table having dinner. I was telling something to Dad when my mom interrupted me. "Honey, let's go to," started Mom. "Hey," Dad shouted, "don't interrupt. Tyler was speaking." Mom looked at my dad in surprise. "It's fine," I said to Dad. I quickly changed the subject. I didn't want my mom to wonder why my dad was defending me so much, or she might become suspicious. I decided I should probably not ask Dad to do anything for me for a while. It seemed as though he was becoming a bit overprotective of me. So that evening, I sat down and did my history homework. It was the first time in months that I had had to do any work for myself. I rushed through it as quickly as I could and forwarded it to my teacher, Miss Jenkins. The next morning at school, I was walking through the school corridor when I heard my name being called. "Tyler, come here." It was Miss Jenkins. I wondered what she wanted with me. "Yes, miss," I said. "The homework you just handed in was terrible," she said. "You will have to do it again, and I'm also giving you an extra essay to write. It must be a minimum of 2,000 words, and I want it finished by tomorrow." I really hated her. She was always giving me extra work to do. I knew that the only reason she was always so mean and nasty was because she was still single. I really wanted to pay her back for always picking on me. That's when the idea popped into my head. I had the perfect plan. I would just get my dad to go on a date with her. I would tell him to take her somewhere nice for dinner, but to treat her really badly on the date. When I got home, I told my dad what I wanted him to do. "Okay, Tyler, anything for you, son," said Dad. "I just want to make you happy." My dad sent Miss Jenkins a text asking to take her out for dinner on Friday night. Mom was going out for dinner with her friend that night, so she would be out of the way. When my dad left to go to the restaurant, I waited for a few minutes and then followed him. I wanted to see Miss Jenkins' face when she got some of her own treatment. When I got to the restaurant, I hid at the back of the room. I could see my dad and Miss Jenkins sitting at a table together. Dad was saying something to her. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but from the look on Miss Jenkins' face, I could tell it was something mean. I was laughing to myself when suddenly my heart dropped. I couldn't believe it. My mom and her friend had just walked into the restaurant. I tried to get her attention so she didn't see Dad, but it was too late. As soon as my mom saw Dad and Miss Jenkins together, she started screaming. "How dare you cheat on me? You are going to regret this." Mom ran out of the restaurant crying. My dad jumped up. "Oh no," he shouted as he tried to stop Mom. But he wasn't quick enough. Mom was nowhere to be seen. I ran over to my dad. "Dad, this is terrible," I said. "I order you to..." But before I could finish my sentence, Dad screamed at me. "That's enough, Tyler." "Huh? You spoke back to me? How dare you?" I said. "Why aren't you doing as I say?" "Haven't you figured it out yet, Tyler? I've been faking this whole time." "What? So you mean you weren't brainwashed all along?" "No, of course I wasn't." You can't control someone just from reading a book and waving a watch in front of their eyes for a few minutes. So why did you play along with it? Why did you do everything I told you to do? Dad told me that he had just wanted to see how low I would stoop. He wanted to see how bad I would treat my own father if I was given the chance. "Now I realize you have got to change," said Dad. "Your behavior has gotten out of control." Then he said the worst thing you could possibly imagine. "We are going to send you to summer school, Tyler. They will need to teach you how to behave. There will be no school holidays for you this year." "No, Dad, please, not summer school," I begged. "I'll do anything you ask me to. Just please, don't send me away." "Can't you see what you've done? Because of you, my wife now thinks I'm cheating on her." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it to go this far. I just got carried away with the power." "Well, now you're going to have to explain it all to your mom." "But how will I do that? Mom will be so mad." "Well, you had better figure out a way, or we are going to end up getting a divorce." I ran out of the restaurant and straight home. I had no idea what I was going to say to my mom, but I knew I needed to find her, quickly. I opened the front door. I was expecting to see my mom in the kitchen, but all I saw was a note on the kitchen table. I picked it up, my hands shaking as I read it. "I can't handle this," it said. "I'm divorcing your dad and leaving the country now. I'm sorry, Tyler. You will never see me again." I couldn't believe Mom had already gone. I knew that I had to get to the airport and stop her before she got on the plane. I grabbed my coat and I was just about to head out the front door when I heard a sound coming from the living room. There was definitely someone inside the house. I knew my dad was still at the restaurant and my mom had gone to the airport. My heart started beating madly. I realized that someone must have broken into our house. If they were burglars, I knew they would probably be armed. I would need something to defend myself. I looked around for a weapon, but all I could find was a broom. I picked it up and crept towards the living room. I knew that I had to stop them before they got away with any of our things. I opened the door screaming as loudly as I could, hoping to scare them off. But it wasn't burglars in there. It was my mom and dad. I looked at them in astonishment. They were sitting on the sofa together and laughing uncontrollably. "You can put the broom down," said Dad. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked them. "Oh, Tyler, you've been a very silly boy," said Mom. "I know what you've been doing to your dad." It turns out that Mom had known all along what I had been doing to my dad. He had even told her that he was taking Miss Jenkins on a pretend date. Mom had just been acting when she came to the restaurant and screamed at my dad. They had even told Miss Jenkins it wasn't a real date. She had agreed to help Mom and Dad as they all just wanted to teach me a lesson. After that, I was grounded for a month. This turn of events had shocked me to my core, but I guess I deserved it.
I could hear the raised voices as I walked down my street. Surely, that couldn't be coming from my house. My mom and dad never argued. But as I got closer, I realized that it was my mom and dad. I wondered what could have happened to make them fight like that. I opened the front door and the shouting hit me like a ton of bricks. "You betrayed me! No, it was you who betrayed me! I hate you! I never want to see you again!" That was my mom. Why would she say something like that to my dad? I wondered what he could have done. "Don't worry, I'm out of here," shouted Dad. "Do you really think I want to spend another minute of my time with someone like you? This couldn't be happening." "What's going on?" I asked. Mom and Dad looked around in surprise. They hadn't realized I had been standing there, listening to everything they said. Dad barged past me and out the front door, slamming it behind him as he went. But before I go on, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more crazy stories. I couldn't understand why there had been fighting. I always thought they were so in love, the perfect couple. But I guess they hadn't been as happy as I thought, because the following day my dad packed up all his things and left our house for good. He got an apartment on the other side of town. He told me that he wanted me to go and live with him there, but Mom also wanted me to live with her. I tried to ask them both what had happened to make them fight, but they were both really vague. I don't know if they were trying to protect me or if they thought I wouldn't understand. Mom just said things hadn't been going well for a while, and my dad said they had drifted apart. It didn't seem like a good enough reason to get divorced, but I suppose they knew what they were doing. They told me that by the end of the week, I would have to decide which one of them I was going to live with. It wasn't an easy decision. My dad just kept on showering me with presents. In the following couple of days, he literally bought me everything I'd asked for in the last few months. I knew he was trying to buy me, but it was hard to resist. My mom, on the other hand, just tried to guilt trip me into staying with her. "You wouldn't leave me, darling, would you? Not after everything I have done for you," she said. "Remember, I carried you in my tummy for 9 months. I fed you, bathed you, read you stories, whilst all your father did was go to work. It was too difficult. How on earth could I choose between one parent or another? I decided the only thing for it was to flip a coin. So that's what I did. Heads up, I stay with my mom. Tails, I go live with my dad. I flipped the coin in the air. I watched as it turned over and over as it tumbled back down. I caught it on the back of my hand. It was heads. So I stayed at home with my mom. Dad was really upset when I told him my decision. "I promise I will come and see you as often as I can," I told him. I really missed my dad. We used to spend every evening together, watching TV or out in the garden if the weather was nice. Now I just sat in my room, alone in front of my computer. Mom was always busy doing something. She said that she didn't have time to laze around all night in front of the television. I couldn't wait for the weekend so that I could go and see my dad. When the school bell rang to say it was the end of the day, I ran out of the school gates. I could see my dad's car parked at the end of the road. I jumped in and gave Dad a big hug. "I've missed you so much," I said. "And I've missed you too, Bella," said Dad. "I've got a really special weekend planned for us." That night we ordered pizza and sat together watching TV. It was a perfect way to spend a Friday night. The next day, Dad took me into town to go shopping. Then we went to see a movie. The weekend went by so quickly. Before I knew it, it was time for Dad to drop me back to my mom's house. I didn't want to go, but I knew I had no choice. The week seemed to drag by, but eventually it was Thursday night. The next day, I would be going to see my dad again. I was sitting in my room wondering what my dad would have planned for us to do that weekend when I heard a loud knock at the door. I wondered who could be coming to our house at that time of night. I went downstairs and was surprised to see 2 policemen standing in our hallway. "What's happened, Mom?" I asked. Mom looked at me. "Apparently your dad has been involved in some sort of incident," she said. "What do you mean?" "Someone has attempted to murder him." The blood drained from my face. "Is he going to be okay?" "I'm sorry," said the policeman. "We don't have any more details at the moment. We will take you to the hospital now so that you can see your dad." I got in the police car and we drove to the hospital. When I got there, Dad was laid in bed. He was covered in bandages. "Dad, are you okay?" I cried as I ran to his bedside. "He has been sedated," said his doctor. "We need him to rest to recover from his injuries." "What happened to him?" The doctor told me that someone had stabbed my dad. He had been injured quite badly, but they felt sure he would make it. Luckily, his wounds weren't too deep. I couldn't understand who would want to do this to my dad. He was such a kind man. He didn't have any enemies. I called Mom and told her that Dad was going to be fine. "I'm going to go over to his apartment before I come home," I said. "I just want to make sure everything is okay there." "Okay, Bella, be careful," Mom said. When I got to Dad's apartment, everything looked normal. There was no sign of a break-in or anything. I went inside. The apartment looked exactly the same as when I'd left it last week. Nothing out of place. It just didn't make sense to me. I was about to leave when I suddenly spotted something on the floor. It was a gemstone, a round red ruby. I wondered where it could have come from. I picked it up and put it in my pocket. I decided I would ask Dad about it when he woke up. I locked the door and went back home to my mom's. I thought that she would show a little concern about Dad, but it seemed like she didn't care at all. When I went into the kitchen, she didn't ask a thing. She just carried on stirring the pot on the stove. "Dinner will be ready soon, Bella," she said. "Go get a shower and come straight down." I did as Mom told me. I couldn't believe she was being so heartless. Even though they were getting a divorce now, she must have loved him at one point. After my shower, I went and sat at the dining room table. Mom came in with a steaming bowl in her hands. That's when I saw it. The necklace Mom was wearing was missing a stone. There was a big hole where once there had been a bright red ruby. I knew I had to confront her. I pulled the ruby out of my pocket. "Mom, is this yours?" I asked her. "Oh, thank you, darling," she said. "I've been looking for that everywhere. Where did you find it?" "In Dad's apartment." Mom looked at me and I realized I knew what she had done. She was the one who tried to murder my dad. "Why did you want to hurt Dad?" I asked her. "Your dad is a spy for the British government," she said. "He's been trying to get secrets out of me because I work for the United States government. I had to silence him. That's why I did it. You're not going to tell anyone, are you? You wouldn't put your own mother in prison, would you? This is crazy, I thought. I'm going to see Dad, I shouted. I need to hear what he has to say. I ran out of the house and went straight to the hospital. Dad was sitting up in bed. He looked really happy to see me. I know you're a spy, I shouted at him. He looked shocked. Who told you that? He asked. Mom told me. I know all about you trying to get secrets out of her. Well, did she also tell you that she is a Russian spy? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Did my dad think I was stupid? Mom's not from Russia. She's from Texas, I said. Oh, that's just the fake identity she made for herself. She has perfected the Texas accent to fool everyone. But what about my grandparents? I asked him. They live in Texas. We have stayed there so many times. Dad told me that my mom had hired these people to pretend to be my grandparents, to fool us into believing that she was really from Texas. Wait, so are you both spies then? I asked Dad. No, only your mom. I didn't know who to believe. It was crazy. I thought I had two normal parents, and now they were both saying that the other was a spy. I didn't know which one I could trust, but seeing as my dad was the one who was in the hospital, I guess that I had to believe him. I went back to Mom's and packed up all my things. I'm going to live with Dad, I told her. You won't tell anyone, right? She said. You won't get me sent to prison, will you? I shook my head. I didn't like what she had done, but she was still my mom. I won't tell anyone as long as you leave me and Dad alone now. Mom agreed, and I went to live with my dad. It was a couple of weeks later when I heard a car pull up outside my dad's apartment. I looked out of the window. It was a police car, and two policemen were walking towards our door. My heart dropped. I wondered what they were coming for. Before they had a chance to knock, I opened the door. Hello, Bella, one of the policemen said. Can we come in? I took them into the lounge and we sat on the sofa. That's when they told me the most shocking thing. Someone has attempted to murder your mom, they said. First my dad, now my mom? I thought. Is she okay? I asked. Yes, she's fine, but we just wanted to ask if you had any idea who might do this to her. I told the policeman that I didn't know anything. As soon as they drove off, I put on my coat and set off to my mom's house. I was determined I would find out who had done this to her. I thought that as she was a spy, maybe she got into trouble with some bad people. But when I got to my mom's house, I saw something I wasn't expecting. On the floor was a handkerchief. I picked it up. I would recognize it anywhere. It had my dad's initials embroidered in one corner. I felt more confused than ever. I wondered if my mom had been telling the truth all along. Had it actually been my dad that was the spy? I decided that the only way to find out the truth was to get them both together and force them to tell me. That's when I came up with my plan. It all took place later that night. I snuck up on my dad while he was in the living room and hit him over the head. I blindfolded my mom while she was sleeping and dragged them both down to the basement and tied them both to a chair. Oh, and if you're wondering how I managed to kidnap two spies, I'm a master in karate. I've studied it for more than 10 years. I guess that is one good thing my parents did for me. It took a while for my dad to come around from the bash on his head, but eventually he opened his eyes. I took off my mom's blindfold. They both looked in surprise at each other. You tell me the truth right now, I screamed at them. I want to know which one of you is really a spy. My parents looked at each other and nodded. We are both spies, they said. My jaw dropped. Seriously? So now I'm in a dilemma. Do I report my mom for attempting to kill my dad? Or do I report my dad for doing the same thing to her? It's the hardest decision of my life. I have to choose between my mom and my dad. Please help me decide. Leave your answers in the comments below.
For as long as I could remember, it was just me and my mom. My dad left when my mom was pregnant, and I could never forgive him for what he did to my mom. She had to raise me all on her own, and to make matters worse, she had a low-paying job and lived in a really bad part of town. Things were tough. My dad had abandoned me and my mom, and we were really poor. But then something happened that changed everything, and my life was never the same after that. But before I go on, make sure that you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell, and you will be rich when you're older. Trust me, it really works. My mom and I lived in a single-bedroom apartment with moldy walls and terrible living conditions. It was pretty bad. I remember going to bed on an empty stomach most nights, and for my mom, that was even more often since she preferred to give me food rather than eat herself. I went to a nearby school, but the kids were mean and the teachers didn't even care about the students. Plus, I had to wear old uniforms that previous students had left behind because my mom couldn't afford to buy me a new school uniform. Life was tough, to say the least. As I grew older, I never really had any hopes of getting a good job or making a lot of money. Because, like they say, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, right? But I was still going to try. When I graduated high school, I got a job at a restaurant as a waiter. They paid me next to nothing, and my boss treated me really badly. My colleagues were fine, but I really hated getting up for work each morning. Life was just so boring and so hard. But then came that fateful day, the day when my life changed forever. It was a Tuesday evening. I remember because on a Tuesday we sell tacos at the restaurant, and I was picking up an order of tacos and handing them to the customers. Finally, my shift ended and I walked home. The restaurant was only a 5-minute walk from my home, so that wasn't too bad. On the way, I stopped at a convenience store. The cashier greeted me as I walked in. "Hey there, Adam," said the cashier. We knew each other since I had grown up in this apartment ever since I was a little kid. "Hey, Tom," I replied. "Got any chocolate nuts?" "Oh, sorry, we sold out of those. But listen, there's a lottery going on tonight. They're announcing the winners on TV. You should buy a lottery ticket. You never know, you might win." "Oh, I don't know, Tom," I said. "I don't really want to waste my money. I have little enough as it is." "Adam, I have a feeling you're gonna be lucky tonight," said Tom. "Tell you what, you can have a lottery ticket on the house." "Wow, thank you, Tom," I replied in surprise. Tom handed me a ticket and I went home. When I opened the door, my mom had also just gotten back from work. She had bags under her eyes and looked like she'd seen a ghost. I felt so angry that my mom had to work so hard just to pay bills. But maybe this lottery ticket would change things. "Look, Mom, I got a lottery ticket," I said. "Oh, that's nice, Adam," she said. "But you shouldn't be wasting money on those things. We never win." "No, but Tom bought it for me." "Wow, that was very kind of him. All right, let's pop the television on and see if we win." We sat on the couch and switched to the right channel. They had just started, and before long, the winning numbers appeared on the screen. I looked down at my ticket and my heart leapt up into my chest. We won! We won! I jumped to my feet and started dancing around the place. We won! We won! We won! My mom was so confused by my reaction, but once she read the numbers on the ticket and cross-referenced them to the ones on the TV, she started jumping for joy too. We won the lottery! We were gonna be millionaires! I literally couldn't believe my luck. This was almost too good to be true. I immediately called up the company and confirmed that I had the right numbers. The next day, I went to their office and signed a bunch of papers and took a ton of photos. And next thing I knew, $100 million had been transferred to my bank account. I wasn't just rich, I was super rich. Of course, I gave a lot of money to Tom the cashier. I gave him $10 million. He more than deserved it. He was the one who had given me the ticket for free, and I never would have gotten it if it weren't for him. Next, I gave some money to my friends at work. They worked so hard every day, and they definitely deserved the money. I didn't give it to my boss, though. He definitely didn't deserve it. And finally, of course, I bought my mom a nice house to live in. Not too big, but big enough, in a nice part of town where the neighbors were kind and friendly. I told Mom to quit her job since we had enough money to live off for the rest of our life. And I also quit my job at the restaurant. Things were great. I was settling into the rich life quite nicely. We could eat whatever we wanted, buy whatever we wanted. It was great. Of course, I didn't forget about where I had come from, and I donated a ton of money to charities as well. For a while, things were fine. I had also gotten quite famous. People started to recognize my face as the one who won $100 million. Some old friends of mine would message me after years of no contact and ask for money. I knew they were just using me, but still, I felt bad and I gave them a bit. Nothing huge, just a bit to help them out. But then, something happened that threw my world upside down. My mom and I were at home. It was a Monday, but we had no work. No bosses to yell at us, no shifts to run. It was bliss. But then, suddenly, the doorbell rang. I wondered who it was. My mom went to open the door, and then I heard her scream. Panicking, I rushed to help her, but froze in my tracks. There was a man at the door. He was much older than me, probably about my mom's age, and there was something about him that was familiar. Mom looked like she really had seen a ghost. She was shaking all over. "Hi, sweetie," said the man, and looked sadly at my mom. He then glanced over at me. "Wow, you've grown, haven't you, son?" "Mom, who is this?" I asked, though I feared I knew the answer. Mom took a deep breath. "This is your dad." And then, well, things started to change a lot after that. Dad came in and we all sat in the living room. No one spoke. It was so awkward, but finally, after about 10 minutes of silence, Dad opened his mouth. "Look, I know you'll probably never forgive me, but I've realized something," said Dad. "I never should have left you two. I love you so much, but I felt like I wasn't good enough for you. I felt like you two were better off without me. That's why I left. I realize now that that was a mistake. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me." I was very suspicious. "Why come back now? Why didn't you come back 10 years ago?" Dad nodded sadly. "I was stuck abroad. I had no money to come back. I tried to contact you, but I guess my messages never went through." "So it has nothing to do with the fact that I won the lottery, right?" I asked skeptically. "Adam, don't be rude," said Mom in shock. Dad smiled at Mom, and Mom smiled nervously back, and that's when it hit me. Mom was falling in love with Dad again. I had to put a stop to this. I was sure Dad only came back for my money. Why else? It couldn't be a coincidence that he came back now. After that, we talked for a while, and Mom asked me to give them some time alone. I was angry, so I left in a huff and got into my car and drove off. I needed time to think. By the time I came back, Mom and Dad were holding hands. Dad had sneaked his way back into our lives. And Mom was too in love to realize it. I had to prove to her that Dad was not an honest man. I had to make her realize that this was all an act. Dad ended up moving into the house with us. He tried to build a relationship with me, but I was not gonna fall for his trick. I could see right through him. He was only here for my money. I decided I needed to make a trap. I needed to prove to Mom that Dad was not a good person and that we had to get him out of our lives once and for all. I called up Tom. I told him about my plan and he agreed. Everything was falling into place. The plan was ready and Dad had no clue. The next day, I was sitting at the breakfast table with Mom and Dad when a van pulled up outside our house. I went to see who it was, but suddenly, a man wearing a black mask came in and told us he was kidnapping us. He grabbed me and tied my wrists and did the same for my mom and dad. We were all screaming in fear, calling for help, but no one heard us. We were forced into the back of the van. I was blindfolded, so I couldn't see where anything was. Finally, after about an hour's drive, we pulled to a stop and were taken to this warehouse. The blindfold was taken off me and I could only see Dad. My mom was nowhere in sight. "Where's my mom?" I demanded. The man with the black mask ignored me, and he looked at my dad. "I'm going to have you play a little game, all right?" Dad nodded nervously. He looked terrified. "Okay," continued the masked man. He pulled me in front of my dad. Then, to my right, he placed a briefcase and opened it to reveal a ton of money. "You're going to choose. We have $50 million here. Or your son. What's it gonna be?" "Are you insane?" yelled Dad. The masked man nodded. "Maybe. So you'd better choose. You have 10 seconds, starting now." "Dad, please pick me. Save me," I yelled. But Dad didn't say anything. He glanced at me, then the money, then back to me, and he closed his eyes. "I pick the $50 million, he said. I couldn't believe my ears. Did he really just say that? The masked man, or rather, Tom, took off his mask and looked at my dad with disgust. "That's very disappointing." Then Tom pointed to the other guys and went into a room. I hadn't noticed it before, but there was a mirror there, and my mom had actually been hiding behind it, watching the whole thing. She came out of the secret room now and looked so angry with my dad. "How dare you!" she cried. Dad looked so confused. "What's going on?" But Mom wasn't having it. She told him she never wanted to see his face ever again, and that they were over forever. I was glad to hear it. Tom untied me, and we left Dad there to get home by himself. The plan had worked perfectly. Tom was a really good fake kidnapper. Dad tried to come to us afterwards and apologize, but we called the police on him for harassing us, and he never came near us again. Mom and I are living happily together now, and things are going great. It makes me sad that my dad would pick money over me, but I guess it does show that you shouldn't trust everything you see. If there is such a thing as the world's worst dad award, my dad no doubt would be the one to get it. He was the most selfish, self-centered, antisocial person ever. My mom was out of the picture ever since I was not even a toddler, which meant it was just me and my dad. And no, I didn't have any chance of doing the usual father-son stuff with him, like playing baseball or watching football together. He was hence the worst, not only because he didn't give me any time, but also because he used me and took advantage of me. He used me to get girls ever since I was a kid. But before we move on, like this video, hit that subscribe button and activate the notification bell. And luck will follow you like a truck. Trust me, it works. Let me explain. When I was a kid, my dad would hire a new nanny every month. I know that doesn't sound very fishy, but it happened every month, like a ritual, without a break. One time, before my last nanny disappeared, something strange happened. I was around 14 at the time. I had just got back home from school and wanted a snack. I saw my nanny in the living room, so I went to request her to make me one. "Myra, would you make me a snack?" I asked. "Why would I? I don't know you. Where am I?" she said and stormed out of the house as fast as she could. Weird, right? I know. That was why that event specifically stayed in my memory. For a few years after that, everything was fine until one day. I was about to go out of the house to play basketball with some friends when my dad suddenly stopped me at the door. "I have something to talk to you about," he said, so I came back in. "What is it?" I asked. I was just thinking maybe he wanted me to bring in some groceries, but what he asked of me shocked me completely. "I want you to get me girls," he said without a bit of hesitation. Now, my dad was not the making a joke type, so I knew he was serious. "No, Dad, I would never do anything like that," I replied as I was annoyed. But then he started speaking as if he was blackmailing me. "You do that or you don't have a home anymore. You're not going to get a penny from me," he said and left. Do you guys see what happened here? I was left without a choice. I had to do everything that he asked. He demanded girls with specific features, like the girls had to have red curly hair and had to be over 5'7" in height. Just for that reason, he made a couple of fake IDs that gave me access to clubs. That was how it went. I pretended to be older than my actual age and entered bars. There, I met with girls that met my father's taste. I talked with them for a while and asked them to come home with me. It might seem like I'm bluffing, but I never used force on any of the girls I brought home. Thanks to my handsome, soft, and humble looks, they would just be ready to come with me without any question. After bringing them home, I left them in the living room as my dad had instructed and went up to my room. I had no idea what happened after that. It was just a huge, dark blank in my mind, and honestly, I wanted to keep it that way. That was why I never questioned my dad about what exactly he needed the girls for. I just went out and got them home twice a week. However, I didn't always pick the girls up from the bars. Sometimes I would make a trip to the beach for that, or sometimes the public park. It was easier because of my good looks and sweet talking. But the girls that I picked up, they weren't attractive to me at all. Not even one. They were just for my dad. One day, I was in the park looking for a girl to take home when suddenly I saw a girl sitting by herself enjoying a sandwich. She was so beautiful that she just blew my mind away at the first glance. I couldn't resist but approached her and talked. "I'm Edna," she said with her soft and soothing voice, and I also introduced myself. She had the most beautiful eyes, and her hair was red and curly but short. We talked for a long time, and suddenly I realized what I was there for. However, I just couldn't bring myself to take her for my dad. So I just got her number and came back home without a girl. And you might have already guessed that my father was furious, like a madman when I showed up alone. "You're not getting any money this week, or food," he said, but I just ignored him and went straight to my room. Honestly, I couldn't care less as my head was in the clouds because of the girl I had just met. After getting to my room, I locked the door, jumped on my bed, and started chatting with her on the phone. She was the first and only girl I had ever liked, so I was naturally talking with her all the time. And then one thing led to the other, and we eventually started dating as she had the same feeling for me. Around that time, I completely stopped getting girls for my dad because, first, I didn't like it, and second, I wanted to invest all my time in Edna, which she deserved. She was such a good influence in my life, like an angel. I was just falling deeply in love with her. One day, Edna and I were on one of our regular dates when suddenly we felt like we were being followed. First, a shaky-looking car was tailing us on the way, and then some guy with black overalls on was suspiciously walking behind us when we were strolling around the park. However, after some time, the guy just walked away, so we ignored the whole situation and focused on enjoying each other's company. That day, when I went home, my dad was waiting for me in the living room. I was trying to go straight to my room, but he stopped me and called me over. And again, he started up with bringing him the girls and all that nonsense. Dad, how long are you planning to use me like this? First the nannies when I was young and now all this? I said in anger. I want you to get me one, specifically this one. Otherwise you can get out of my house and never come back, he said, and passed me a picture. When I saw who was in the picture, I was so shocked and angry that my blood literally started to boil. It was Edna, and the picture was taken on our date. It finally made sense to me that my dad was the one stalking us on our date. It made me so angry. There was no way I was going to give Edna to my dad. She was my girlfriend. You're just shameless, aren't you? You're trying to take away the one person in this world that makes me happy, I screamed at him. Without thinking any further, I went up to my room, grabbed my things, and stormed out of the house. But just as I got out, I got a notification on my phone. It was a text from Edna. Have you seen the news recently? It read. No, why? I replied. She immediately called me and told me that there was a sketch of a person that looked just like me all over the news. The police are looking for you. They're saying you've kidnapped girls. What's going on? She said and started crying and demanding me to explain. I'll explain everything, but you have to meet me first, I told her, and she agreed. She immediately picked me up in her car, and from there we made our way to a motel. There I sat down and explained how my dad had been using me all my life to get girls. He used me to get nannies when I was a child, and then to lure them to the house when I got the looks. I told her, but she said nothing and kept looking at me. Trust me, I have no idea why he needed them. I never asked him. I told her and explained further how he had blackmailed me. Could he possibly be a criminal? I said to myself, worrying my heart out. Yes, Edna said, but he's not the worst. I was shocked. How on earth could she possibly know that, I thought.